after years of doing this, it's not that I know the answers. It's actually that I know what not to do. It's not just a physical reaction. It's not random. Your gut is actually taking zillions of data points from your experience and it's telling you something, right? And so where success comes from is just doing something diligently over time.
This is Inspiring Women. I'm Lori McGraw, and today I'm speaking with Cara Munnis. She is the Chief Product Officer of Cara Lumen. She's the operating partner at New Fire Global Partners. She's 15 years in product. She's worked at organizations like Amwell, like Blue Shield of California. She is no stranger to a high-paced environment. She is a big fan of tech. Cara, thank you for being on Inspiring Women.
Thank you for having me, Lori. It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. I want to talk about product roles and product management. I think that this is sort of a really interesting area in a particularly interesting time. You grew up sort of like well studied. You understand how to do product management, various tactics, various methodologies. A big fan of Conway's Law, which I want to
Hmm.
learn about. But we're
Sure.
also in a time where product management is changing at a pretty rapid pace. So why don't we get grounded in product leadership generally? And let's start with some of the principles like Conway's Law. Why are you such a fan? And first of all,
Yeah.
what is it?
Yeah. Great question. So, yeah, I think before I answer Conway's Law in particular, let's just start with when we talk about product management, for me, what have I been working on? So for me, product management has been generally focused on healthcare technology, SaaS platforms in general, where we're connecting patients, providers. You have the buyers involved, so you have the health system administrators. You also have the payers or the employers who are acquiring the product for their patients and members. And so it's a really complex question to answer because the products themselves are very complex. We have all these different end user types, but you have to appease the ones who bought the product as well. And I've had experience working in all sorts of digital health experiences, most of them consumer facing. So things like you mentioned, telehealth and the digital condition management programs, wellness programs, EMRs, utilization management, disease management, and care management platforms as well. And so, with all of this coming together, I think that it does make product management complicated.
Hmm.
And looking at, what is product management? What is good product management? So, for me to answer that question, it takes some effort to come up with a succinct answer. But I think, generally speaking, product management is the discipline inside an organization where you're maximizing the investments on a product to achieve customer satisfaction over time as well as profitability. And those two things are really always at odds with each other. You've got customers who have many, many requests, right? But if you were to build everything for every customer, you'd have a low margin product. Your engineering teams would be spread thin, and investors, of course, wouldn't like that for your healthcare tech company. And then if you were to only look at high margin product, you might have a great, operating margin, but you would probably lose some customers because they'd be wanting for more. And so that is really, to me, in a nutshell, what is product management. And so when it comes to, trying to navigate and execute in a product management space in healthcare in particular, there are two frameworks that I constantly come back to. The first one's actually one that I learned. I read the book Good to Great, I want to say 15 plus years ago. And there's this one
Jim
chapter.
Conway.
Yes, I know. I think he went to my high school, so it's a little bit of a claim to fame. But um, he had talked about the hedgehog concept, and there's this whole chapter about the economic denominator and finding your economic denominator. So this I have become obsessed with, in every single company I've worked in. I find that you have to define this as a product leader because of the B2B to C nature of these products, right? We are creating end user experiences for patients and providers, but we are trying to achieve the business results for the enterprise level buyers who are those health systems and the payers. And so if you don't have an answer to, well, what is actually driving the economic engine here at the end user level, you can get very distracted. You can really kind of chase down a lot of different requests that might not actually drive the result. So that's one. The second one is Conway's Law. So Conway's Law, yeah, again, I heard it, I don't know, 10 years ago, and it just made sense. So Conway's Law basically says that organizations, when they produce a product or service, that product or service is going to exactly mirror the internal communication structure that organization uses internally. So when you experience that product, like let's say, Laura, you are the CMO at an organization and I'm head of product. And let's say our teams weren't including your organization, your medical directors in writing requirements. What the end users are going to experience is maybe this beautiful UI, but they might not actually be taking the steps in the workflow that actually achieve the clinical outcome that the medical team is trying to achieve, right? And so they will actually directly experience this disconnect. And this just made sense to me. As a product manager, you see this all the time. Oh, I forgot to include that person.
Yep.
No wonder that, no wonder they're having this complaint now. And so it all comes down to, I think, communication. So what I use Conway's Law for is to help me design the right organizational structures and the right expectations when it comes to the product development life cycle and processes that we're using.
Kara, what you just described in terms of the discipline of product management is there's a lot of complexity in what you just went through in terms of sort of like how to go about it, all the different people that you need to communicate with, that you need to express their communication. Um, and for people who don't sort of like know the bowels of like the product management and workflows and how to,
Mhm.
do all of this design thinking,
Yeah.
I think the best products we all know are the ones that are easy. One of the other things that I think you're dealing with is, when you're working with health plans as an organization or health systems or tech companies, even digital health tech companies, companies who have been around for a little bit and have a number of customers, there's just complexity. There is ugly mess under the covers in terms of all of those things that you need to consider. And you don't have endless budget and you never have
Mhm.
endless time to work with all those things. So, in terms of the balance of all of those different things, I think that we all know good product management, excellent product management when we experience a product and it's just easy. We don't need a manual, we don't need
Mhm.
instructions. We just know how to use it. It works. It's a good experience for us. So all of those things that you're balancing with those disciplines of Conway's law, the hedgehog concept, you name
Mhm.
it. How how do you know when you've got it? When you've got the right balance? Is it a moment? Does it just click in your head? How do you build it in your teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say I come at it from both top and bottom, so two directions. So the first is we're always listening to our end users. What friction points do you have? What satisfiers and dissatisfiers do you have with the product? Everyone always wants more. I think it is a bit of a thankless job, and that the product can always do more. Like you said, resources are finite. This is just that fact of life.
Reality.
Yeah, and so there's always more that you could be doing. I'm not sure, many of us get a huge pat on the back when the product is really doing well, but if you can measure success, right, at the business level, and so this is where I spend a lot of my time understanding what does success look like for my customers or for my organization that is trying to turn a profit on my product. Is it about membership growth or utilization growth? Is it about revenue in? Is it about profitability? Is it about being a tech leader and having those innovative white papers out there that you can point to? It's really important that you get that defined up front, you get agreement on that. From there, you can define a prioritization methodology. You can also start to understand, okay, in my product, how am I going to measure success in these areas? I need some, data attributes that are either leading or lagging indicators or actual indicators of this success. Once we have developed a feature, I can see what kind of change did it make. That is probably the only time where I've really had the executive team saying, yes, I can see that this actually really delivered a result. But you have to do all the data work. You have to do that investigation. You have to do all the eventing down at the end user level. You have to make that UX investment that you were talking about to make the experience something that users really want to use so that they are actually doing the thing in the product that's pulling down the events that you need to measure. And then you have to do that population level aggregation of the data to actually tell that story.
Kara, when you talk about this, the level of discipline that you're talking about, it really shows up in terms of how you talk about the craft, the art of what product management actually is. Why did you start there? How did you get
Mhm.
into this discipline? Because it's often dominated. It's often dominated in more of a male way. You're in high tech organization today, and throughout
Mhm.
your career. How did this become your trajectory?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of people make these zigzags in their career, and that's absolutely fine, right? But for me, you're right. I did kind of find product management early on, and it was a ladder that I wanted to climb. And so, yeah, I mean, it started out with we all got trained up when Agile Scrum became a thing, right? I
Yep.
started out as a project manager and a business systems analyst before that, and then we all became
Are you a
product
black belt
managers.
too? Do you have all the Six
Somewhere in there,
Sigma
yeah.
stuff?
Of course. Um, yeah, and so did all of those things. But I really loved what I did. And I think, my advice to anybody who is also seeking to climb the ladder is to first make sure you're on the right ladder, right? And so that did take discipline, Lori. I remember sitting on the floor in my Alston, Mass apartment, and I was poring over this decision about, do I take this customer implementation role at Athena Health? It was just up and coming. It had some friends from grad school that were working there. They had all these great benefits. But something inside me, kind of said, I'm not sure. And so I did my, super analytical thing that I do always. And made a pros cons list on the floor and on a piece of paper. And I asked myself, what is it about this role or other roles that I liked and disliked? And so I made a decision. I turned the job down. And I was kind of surprised at myself, but I really wanted to stay in this systems building space, and product, I think, really was exciting for me. I don't think there's any replacement for just focused discipline over time. I think that really is what earns you the ability to have that judgment set and be at the executive table. Um, After years of doing this, it's not that I know the answers. It's actually that I know what not to do. That's really
Mhm.
where that gut instinct, it's not just a physical reaction. It's not random. Your gut is actually taking, I don't know, zillions of data points from your experience, and it's telling you something, right? And so that's really, I think, what, where success comes from is just doing something diligently over time. Yeah, sure, I am the only female in the room a lot of times. But
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I don't notice it. I don't think that I show up in a meeting and it's like one of the things that I pick up on. I've worked with some really supportive males, senior to me, peers to me. And yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily a challenge or an issue. I actually think if I were showing up to meetings and noticing that, then I probably would undermine maybe my attitude or my willingness to share information. Lori, I'm the mom of two little kids. I am scraping for minutes in my day.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I am me. The me you're getting here in this meeting is or in this podcast is the same me you're gonna get like at a parent teacher conference or at the executive leadership meetings that I'm in. And
I can picture the apartment in Alston. I am from Boston myself. I lived in an apartment in Brighton, and they weren't the best apartments. So, like the fact
no.
that you were down there, doing a pros cons list and being very thoughtful about, where you were going to direct your time, energy, and professional career, super interesting. How did you balance the next steps? And because you are very thoughtful, the analytics and sort of like how you think about things is coming through, but you're notably, I would just say, clear about the ladder is a choice and being on the right ladder. Just in you're on the speaking circuit. I've heard you speak. You talk about, follow the technology. Okay. I
Hmm.
say follow the money, follow the client. That's the type
Hmm.
of advice that I give, but you've been clear about follow the technology. Why?
Yes, yes. And I'm actually so happy to talk about this. The mentor who told me to do this years ago, I just found out she'd recently passed away, and so I'm so happy to share this advice with others. She told me that she said, whatever role you take, just stay close to the technology. It came from another female leader. I think that at first when I heard that advice, it meant to me, well, technology is always changing, so don't get stagnant, right? And it was just a very basic understanding and interpretation of the advice. But now as a leader of an organization, I find myself still just naturally skewing and spending a lot of time with the technology teams. Um, I want to understand the architecture because I want to know, can this thing scale to achieve the business results, or do we need to make some big change, that we're not necessarily thinking about at the end user level? Um, I'm able to understand, what capabilities we have that are really beating our competitors, or why are we losing certain deals. Helps me if I'm in a prospect conversation to make sure I hit on the right points. And it even helps me with, setting my workforce plans and my budget asks to make sure that I can really articulate and defend my position and why I need what I need for my teams. So I actually find, Lori, that I end up skewing really far on like I almost maybe over index on understanding and being with my tech teams. And something that I set aside time and conscientiously to do is to make sure I spend time with all my other stakeholders, right? Because product is supposed to be, sort of Switzerland in the middle of all of these different stakeholders asking, for many, many things. And so I do try to conscientiously try not to skew too hard on the technology side.
Carrie, you're so disciplined and organized, and honestly, you sound a little bit like a control freak. I imagine like you really sort of like understand the details of stuff, and you're a mom. And as we were talking, just as we were getting on, but before this interview, you were talking about, preparing for holidays and making ishi with your family and really leaning into that. I have to imagine that the control that you
Mm.
deliver in terms of the products that you are building, and the business results that you are achieving for your clients is not showing up the same way at home. So, like, how do you marry these worlds? Do they all fit in perfectly? I'm kind of guessing they don't.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to be really honest. For someone who's led massive technology transformations multiple times at multiple organizations, it's very ironic how hard this transition was for me when I became a mom and to figure out how to truly delegate and what does that look like. I love empowering my team, and there's nothing I'm not prouder of anything in my professional career than when my team is doing well. But I was the one who had a little check boxes, like open boxes every day at the end of my job, and I would spend whatever time I needed to from 5 to 8 p.m. checking every single box off so that I was like completely prepared and ready to go for the next day when everyone else showed up
The
at work.
magic hours.
My magic hours. And I had my daughter 7 years ago, and I lost that. I was instantly gone, right? And it's
Right.
really daunting going back to work. It's burnout prone because I did not know how else to function, and all the things that brought me success, I suddenly had to very quickly adapt. And I'm going to be honest, I think it took me 5 years to actually figure out a new formula. Luckily, I did have some female bosses in those first early years that had kids, and so they
Mhm.
they were flexible with me and they gave me advice, right? They understood when I said, "Hey, I really need to be able to delegate. I need more staff," and they supported me. I also learned how to just do time blocking, some of these basic things that I'd be happy to run myself ragged, like back to back to back all day. Can't do that anymore, right? Because you have to tie things up during the workday. Um, and I think that, now I can say I finally figured out like I need a babysitter twice a week just so that I can, spend the extra time, go the extra mile on a couple of things. And I've also gotten really good at hiring. I have a very specific, bar for what I'm looking for. And I don't compromise on that because I need to delegate. I absolutely have to delegate now, with confidence. And then beyond that, I'll just say working moms, I think we've got to be among the most efficient humans on the planet. I think you do just learn to be more efficient, Lori. And then, even beyond that, I'll say I can look back now, 7 years later, being a parent, a working parent, and say that my kids have taught me actually to be a better leader in a few different ways. My daughter, she's highly emotional, just born that way, right? Didn't like not provoked, just didn't want to doesn't want to change her outfit or whatever it is, right? And the tears are right there. Meanwhile, my son, he is the polar opposite. I mean, I couldn't create him to be more different than she is. And I think these things bring to me like true empathy, truly understand like humans are just different and they can be very emotional, and it's just human nature. And so I think that, all in all, it's made me a better leader, although it was not always easy, working through the
So,
change.
Kara, again, you're so buttoned up, you're so polished, you are a busy executive doing really important work. Give us a little behind the curtains, like your best mom moment, where it just like everything that you had planned to get done on that particular
Oh my
day
gosh.
didn't work out, and you still succeeded in the professional work that you're doing.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that happens to us a lot. The kids are sick, right? So I would say, yeah, I can remember having my daughter had norovirus a couple
Mm.
years ago, and I had a big meeting, I think the next day or whatever, and I was like, I cannot get this thing, and I put on an N95. Luckily, I had one because it was like right after it was like a couple years after COVID, and I just put that thing on and I took care of her all night, and magically handled the meeting the next day. But I think that's another reason why being a parent, a working parent, is so hard. Not only, are you juggling all these things, but you're exhausted. You're just so tired. And there are times when I feel like I have one brain cell processing everything, and I don't know if it comes across to others or not. I can't really tell. I mean, coffee helps, believe me. But you kind of
Coffee
just
helps
keep
a lot of things. Sodas, chocolates, there's a lot of
yeah,
things
chocolate.
like that.
Yeah, but you get through it, and I haven't been fired yet, so I don't know. I guess it's okay.
Kara, yeah, just on that same vein, you also talked about, in addition to picking, great talent, hiring well, which is a skill. It takes practice. It takes,
It does. It really
really
does.
leaning in, waiting for the right candidate, being very, very choosy, and it's hard to do. But you've also talked about picking the right environment, the right work
Mhm.
environment, the right additional leaders that you surround yourself with, whether it's the CEO, the other C-suite that you're with. How did you go about those choices? In the early days, you said no to something with your, pros, cons list, but now you're a senior executive. So how are you
Mhm.
choosing who you work with today?
Yeah, it's a great question. So before I took the chief product officer role, I had read an article that said chief product officers have the shortest tenure of any other C-level executive, and like by more than half, right? So it was like
Hmm.
dramatically less,
It's like
and
2 years. I mean, it's
yeah,
it's two
exactly,
years.
yeah.
You're a couple
So
months into this one. Couple months into this one. How's it
I know,
going?
yeah. Talk to me in a year and a half from now, I guess. But I had to really think about, well, why do I think that is? I mean, of course, I've worked with many, many CPOs before, and I kind of came up with two reasons in my own mind, for why this might be, and things that I had to make sure I felt comfortable with before proceeding. But the first one is, you hear everybody say, "Oh, product managers are the mini CEO." I'm sure you've heard this. Everyone's
Yes.
kind of, it's a common phrase, right? And if you're managing a profit and loss statement and you're responsible for understanding revenues and distribution channels and variable costs and fixed costs and operating margin, then yeah, sure, you are acting a lot like maybe a CEO is overseeing their business. But I think the key thing here is that you aren't the CEO, and there is a CEO, and that means that that CEO has been successful with whatever product vision exists today as you're stepping into this role. And so I just can't underestimate the importance of really vetting the working relationship that you're going to have with your CEO, knowing that they have expectations and there's a reason they're hiring you. What problems are they hoping you're going to solve? And then making sure that you feel like you have the skill sets that are going to match their needs. I think that is really number one. And the second, thing that I would say makes it challenging to be a chief product officer is that it's really hard to form very strong alliances at the top, right? It's not like you're in the growth org with a bunch of other growth executives, or you're in the technology org with a bunch of technology executives. You're supposed to be Switzerland. You're supposed to be sort of in between everybody, and you're the one that's your team's going in there and doing all the hard analyses and coming back with these ROI and investment cases, and you're actually explaining to all of these requesters why their idea is going to sink or swim. And so by default, you're very kindly telling them no a lot of times, and maybe many times a year you have to do this, and you're doing this to your peers. And I think that's where it can be, I think, challenging to potentially, create those alliances that you really do need at the executive level. Which just brings me back to my first point, where it's just so important to have that relationship with the CEO, because really you're the one doing those deep dives and all the dirty hard work to make sure that whatever these investments are, they're going to keep, the economic sustainability intact for the company.
So, Kara, just want to close out with sort of two things. You're so clear about sort of like how you think about your professional job, how you think about your work, what success looks like. And I imagine you're also a bit humble in terms of the skills that you bring to the table. But what is it? that you've discovered as you've grown professionally in these executive roles that makes you so outstanding at what you're doing? Literally, like what did you
Mhm.
discover in yourself that you've honed to be your super skill?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. Let's see. So, you know what? I just keep coming back to that economic engine. I'm obsessed with it. And I took the Myers Briggs and, the Enneagram and all those years ago. And what always came back for me was usually the person who was kind of the orchestrator of it always would always say, "Oh, you're very unusual." Okay, why is that? And they'd say, because you're not like the North and the South where you're like the leader or the follower. They said you're the East and the West. And it's very rare to have that be the two primary characteristics of a person. So the East being the strategic thinker, and the West being the detailed. They said usually you get like a North and a West, or like a South and an East, but you're like you're just like this anomaly. And I think that's actually what makes me successful in my role, is that I can get into the details and see how I need to orchestrate all of these kind of like very detailed processes to achieve that, that buyer level or that bigger business objective. And again, it's all about data, and that's really what we use to make our decisions and show the
Follow the
result.
technology, follow the
Hmm.
data.
That's
Kara,
right.
as we close out on this conversation, this has been awesome. What is your best advice for other aspiring leaders, particularly earlier career stage women
Hmm.
who are looking to be more like you?
Well, um, I would say, I've had to change my communication style over the years. I think when you're in those managerial director level roles, you're kind of always coming with your opinion. You're trying to get every word in that you can to make your case, right? As you grow beyond that, you have to make a real intentional change in listening. You have to listen much more, and ask questions, right? Even if you know the answer, because like I said, a lot of times you've seen it before, but even if you know the answer, you need to bring others along with you. And I think this is the best advice I could give, is to stay curious, stay kind, don't force your opinion, just ask enough questions that eventually, you can kind of bring others along with you, and you'll probably learn something from them in the process, right? Chances are they know something that you don't.
Chances are this has been a great Inspiring Women conversation. I've been speaking with Cara Munnis. And Cara, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Lori. Happy holidays.